All right, everyone. Thank you for hopping on board for the ninth installment of Hop's Lockdown Series. And tonight's guest is none other than the pitching coordinator at Hops, John DeRouin.
Thanks for having me on. It's weird tonight. I'm sitting on the other side, taking the questions instead of asking the questions, but looking forward to getting into some pitching topics tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And this was, I'm not saying this to take credit for it, but this was my idea because I really wanted John to get his information out there because I think it's valuable, and I think that the more people in Rhode Island and especially out into the pitching community, the more people that hear it, the better off that they'll be.
Yeah.
So, John, why don't you start out just by telling us a little bit about how your playing career has evolved and led you up to the point you are now?
Yeah. So my playing career was certainly an interesting one. I guess you can put it that way. I was never blessed with the physical gifts per se. So funny story. I guess I was 13. I ended up getting hurt. I had a shoulder injury, and someone recommended going to see Matt to kind of help through the rehabilitation process because I was about the age that it was right for me to start on a strength and conditioning program. So I went in to go see Matt, and that's going on 7 years now. And it was with Matt through my middle school, through 8th grade and middle school, and then all the way through high school. Played high school baseball, and then played at CCRI. And something that me and Matt had always talked about was, doing pitching stuff at some point. And I've always been one that's kind of immersed myself in trying to learn more and kind of dive into how the body moves and how the body works. So even when I was younger, Matt and I would always go back and forth on stuff, and I was always eager to try and figure out how I can make myself better, considering I wasn't blessed with the physical gifts. So high school was interesting. I went through a lot of stuff. Went through a lot of stuff mentally that kind of really challenged me. Was fortunate enough to still have the opportunity to play college baseball, and just recently finished up playing at CCRI, and now fully diving into this coaching stuff, which I really love to do, and I really enjoy the guys I work with, and learning more day in and day out about pitching and how to develop pitchers. And can't thank Matt enough for the opportunity because it's really been awesome. And I'm kind of excited for what's in store.
Sure. And before we kind of go into exactly what you're working on now, I want to go back a little bit into the coming in the beginning, because you started when you were 13, and then you see where you are, where you are now, and then what you're doing now, what you're teaching now, and that the evolution of strength and conditioning in baseball that you've been experiencing from the other side, not necessarily the coaching side, but the playing side, and then even the pitching aspect, where you were when you were 13, 14 years old, to now diving into it a little bit more on the coaching end.
Yeah, so I think when I was playing, I mean, all the stuff that we talk about currently, I think it was more, it was less specific to the individual. And Matt was one of the only people around that was kind of really specifying things to the individual. But even at that point, I mean, that was back in 2013, 2014, and the information that's available now wasn't available then. The technology was kind of just starting to come into play. Kind of the knowledge of how pitchers need to move specifically, and kind of how each person is so different, especially in how they move on the mound. And I think that was something we were just starting to dive into, but we really didn't know a lot about it. I like to say I was kind of like the crash test dummy when I was in middle school and high school, because we spent a lot of time kind of diving into driveline and understanding the intricacies of a weighted ball program. And it was cool to kind of, looking back on it, it was cool to kind of be a part of that, because it's kind of helped shape me to who I am as a coach today. And I think it's always like, it's important to be open to stuff. And I think that was one thing I was always open to in my playing career. Um, was learning new things, and I think it's helped me as a coach now because I know I don't have all the answers, and it's important to understand that as a coach because at the end of the day, it's a two-way street, and being able to communicate with your athletes and understand, okay, what do they feel? Because now with the technology we have, we're able to piece together those feels of what they actually feel with the data, technology, and the understanding and the video analysis. Of what they're actually doing. So as a player, it really helped me to become more open, I guess I would say. Um, because you hear a lot of guys, and you see this now in baseball, where you have a lot of guys who are really good, but they don't make great coaches. And I think sometimes it's, they were really good at what they did as a player, but they couldn't really tell you what they did. So I think it was kind of beneficial looking back on it in my coaching career that the way it's getting started, that maybe I wasn't as good, because it really opened my eyes to a lot of awesome stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what I was getting at there too is that even as hops in general, where we've come from when you were 13, 14, 15 years old to now in terms of um, working out. And I mean, go back, and I send John pictures sometimes of him when he was 13. I actually posted one a couple weeks ago, and the emphasis on certain exercises and the strategies to get the carryover for baseball. I mean, that was kind of like everybody was kind of making the transition to what we're working on now, and kind of going through that journey with lifting heavy, medicine balls, you incorporating the breathing exercises. Like if I went back to even 2011, 2012, like it's light years different in terms of how we teach kids and how the strength and conditioning programs are written. And like you said, with Driveline and kind of catering those towards more of the individual now, instead of just giving everyone a program, because that's kind of how it was when it first came out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's much simpler now. I think it's much easier to be able to, because now we have so much, like I said, we have so much information, and that's how I think we've grown as hops is everyone's so specific. Like what I found is no two guys are the same. And we've been able to now narrow that process down to be able to address the individual. And I think we've grown. I mean, gosh, I don't really remember what we did 7, 8 years ago. But I don't, like you said, I don't think it's anywhere near what we're doing now. And that's what's so exciting, because it's, who knows where we could be in even another 2 years.
Mhm.
I think that's what's so awesome about what we're doing and where the game is going. Because I'm always willing to learn, and I know you're the same way. And I think that's what's helped guys develop, and we've had so much success with guys going on to play at the college level, professionally, um, even just having successful high school careers. And I think that's what's been so awesome about it.
Yeah, and before we jump, because one of the themes that we've been talking about is guys that have kind of persevered or gone through something in their playing career, and then been able to kind of come out on the other end um, as a better player, probably in some situations a better person and stuff like that. So I do want you to, even just if you touch on it a little bit, just say you talked about some of the mental things that you went through as a junior, and kind of corrected that to then have a successful senior year.
Yeah. So one of the things, and um, I mean, I'm pretty open to share this, and I guess we'll share it now. Yeah, I kind of went through a dark time, I guess you could say, in my baseball career, where I went through a mental battle where it was a struggle some days to play catch, and I guess it's classified as calling it the yips. And it was something that I went through my junior year, that kind of impacted me, that I never really talked about, but it was something that I knew was there, and it was tough to deal with at the time. Um, but I kind of found a way to persevere through it. And then I realized, playing high school baseball that year wasn't something that I could continue with, because I knew it just wasn't going to get me better. And at the end of the day, I knew I still wanted to play college baseball. Um, so I decided to walk away from the rest of my junior year of high school baseball, which was not an easy decision. But looking back on it, it was probably one of the better decisions that I made to help kind of shape me to where I am now. Um, and I kind of just dove in and learned a little bit more about myself and what I really wanted, and really attacked the problem, um, and took it head on. And I think that was something that's benefited me tremendously. Was just saying, like, looking at the situation I'm in and not just getting complacent with it and giving up, but really diving into it and taking it head on and saying, I'm going to overcome it. Because at the end of the day, I knew I still wanted to play college baseball, and I knew I wanted to come back my senior year of high school and have the best year possible. Um, so fortunately, I was able to overcome that and then go out my senior year and have the best year of baseball I probably had ever had in years. So that was something that, I learned a lot from. And, even to continue to play 2 years at CCRI, was something that was awesome too. I guess you could say a year and a half, with this year getting cut short, but um, I learned a lot about myself. So
Right, right. And don't undersell yourself either, because you came out and made second team all division, right? On a situation where going into the season, you weren't really sure if you were going to end up being in the bullpen. First you had to make the team, then you had to decide on, and then you ended up being one of the starters throughout the year, and had a very good senior season. So don't undersell yourself, right?
yeah, I guess so. I guess
I mean, seriously, that's a good story of perseverance and having mental toughness to continue, and then that ability to do that will then make you into a better coach, and work with players, and be able to see, like, it wasn't just, everything wasn't just handed to you. You weren't able to just go in and pick up the ball and then go out there and be successful. That's a testament to your hard work, and how you're continuing to carry that over into your coaching career by studying, looking at videos, reading up on things like that, and continuing education. So that all carries over.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think it helped me tremendously, because it allows me to relate to guys. Because I know I went through probably the worst thing you could possibly go through. And it makes me realize, like, hey, you make a bad throw, I'm not going to yell at you if you make a bad throw. Like, it's just, that was kind of the environment I was always brought up in. Like, playing baseball was a very old school way of thinking, and it gets to you after a while. And maybe it was something that wasn't conscious in my mind, but over time it wore me down. Um, and that kind of helped, like you said, it helped shape me into how I approach coaching now.
Sure, sure. And kind of speaking to that continuing education and learning process, what are you currently doing right now with Driveline?
Yeah, so, like, rewind to December, completed their pitch design certification, which was something that I really wanted to dive into, especially since we are fortunate enough to use Rapsodo at the facility. So I wanted to learn kind of the intricacies of spin rate, spin efficiency, horizontal, vertical break, all that stuff. Um, and then recently, over this time, I started taking their foundations of pitching course, which kind of dives into how the body moves, what we should be looking for in evaluating pitchers, programming, how to integrate blending from flat ground work and plyo work to the mound phase to velocity phases. So, um, yeah, it's really been an awesome course, and you can't thank Driveline enough for all the stuff they put out, because it's really great stuff that's kind of helped me learn more. Like, they have a ton of free articles and stuff that um, have helped me dive into a lot of stuff that's kind of I've used with the guys at the facility. So
Mhm.
it's good for us to communicate too, to be able to go back and forth on stuff.
Right. And what do you think that doing that course so far, what has been one of the more eye-opening things from a pitching standpoint that you've seen?
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes you think you do know a good amount, but you really don't. Um, I think that's one of the things is, every day is an opportunity to learn. And sometimes you go into something and you think, like, oh, I understand what this means or that means. Um, but when you hear it explained differently, you're like, okay, maybe I didn't understand it completely. And I think that's something that I've learned to understand as a coach, is, like, sometimes I don't have all the answers, or sometimes, I may need to learn more about a topic to better explain it to someone else. And I think the ability for them to be able to communicate that through the course, by like dissecting everything and breaking it down using videos. It gives you a deeper understanding, but it also reaffirms sometimes that like, okay, I do understand this, or I like what I've been teaching guys does make sense. But it also helps me grow to be able to implement new stuff. So I think that's what's been really great about it, is it reaffirms some things that I did know, and then it allows me to implement some new things when we get to next off season. So
And that's actually leading into my next question. What do you think um, guys can expect, or what is in terms of your program and what you want to do and implement? You don't have to give specific details, but what is something that you want to change or from last year to this year coming up?
well, one of the things that I think that lacks in kind of the Rhode Island baseball community is, I think this has been something that I've noticed, is I think there needs to be more of that group and team environment. Like I think there needs to be a place to go where everyone can train together and lift together, but everyone can also be throwing together. Because I think the throwing aspect of it is just as important. And I know one of the things as a player at Hops that I really appreciated was the relationships, the people that I got to know from around the state. And that's something I want to try and implement this year with this next generation, I guess you can say, is we start to blend everything together where um, the throwing aspect is group based and team related, where guys can be pushing each other, and it gives me an opportunity to be with guys 4 or 5 times a week and not just do the once a week lesson. Um, I think sometimes you can lose out on opportunities to develop guys when you're just seeing them for 30, 45 minutes once a week. So I
Mhm.
think that's something guys can look forward to this offseason is things being a little more group based. I want to make the environment a little more competitive, while also focusing on individualizing and player development, because I think if we can individualize while making things group based, we're gonna maximize the results we can get out of guys.
Sure. No, definitely. I think that per our conversations, that's something that the guys should definitely be looking forward to
Yep.
coming up. Um, Kind of turning a little bit of a different direction. What do you think is the most common pitching flaw that you see in athletes? Let's say at the high school level.
Um, I'd say the first flaw that you usually see, and this has nothing to do with mechanics because this is something we can talk about later on, but I think it's the inability to understand how to play catch. And I think that's something we talked about with Carson on Friday, is the importance of being able to play catch with a purpose. Um, because I look at catch play like batting practice for a hitter, where hitters can take batting practice every day, and something that we can do as pitchers is play catch every day. And I look at every opportunity to throw a baseball as an opportunity to get better and work on something. Um, so I think the biggest thing that I see, like when guys first come in, is they grab the ball and they kind of just stand there and they flick it, and then they move back 5, 6 feet and do some random drill that maybe they learned when they were 12 years old that probably doesn't have any benefit to what they need. Um, so that's probably the biggest thing, is the inability to understand how to play catch and do it with a purpose, because I think that can go a long way in translating to mound success. Because I think it's hard to turn that switch on if you're not doing it all the time. It's tough to go on the mound and figure out how to pitch with a purpose and how to find focal points and understand, okay, if I make a bad throw, did I not load my back hip correctly, or was my trunk out of sequence? So I think the basics of playing catch and playing catch with a purpose is something that's a lost art, I guess you can say, in the game of baseball nowadays. Um, and I would say that's probably the biggest thing I notice when guys first come in, is that lack of understanding of what it means to play catch with a purpose.
Sure, that's a great answer. And that's another theme that we're kind of seeing with a lot of our panelists, is that guys just don't know how to go about a good and it's also on the coaches a little bit in some certain situations where they're not getting the time
Mhm.
to go through their progressions and to play catch and do it the right way, because the coaches are either short on time or they don't value it enough. So what is a recommendation for something like useful for the high school kids who maybe have like the biggest bang for your buck uh, warm up or drill or just some or catch play? Like, what do you think is something that everybody can do if they have that situation where they're getting rushed?
Well, I would say first develop a consistent routine in the off season. Like what something that we do, and I do with my guys is we develop a consistent like 3 or 4 drills that you can do when you just start off with your catch play that you can pretty much do right out of the gate. So say you're pressed for 15 minutes to play catch, maybe not even that at some high schools. Um, you know that you can get your drill work in that you do like as soon as you start throwing. So one of the drills that we do is a step back drill, so like a hop back. So one of the things that really reinforces is shifting your center of mass back, being able to load into your back hip, driving force through the ground, and it starts off the sequence the way we want it to in an efficient manner. Um, and then another one we do is a modified rocker drill. So we have guys go into like a rocker type stance. And then they lift their legs slightly. Same thing, promotes getting into the back hip. Um, and then another one that we like, this is probably the third one that guys will do is a knee to knee. So you're just bringing front knee to back knee, same thing, feeling getting into your back hip. Um, and then that simulates kind of like a slide step, which is, we can talk about that if we get into mechanics and my opinions on slide steps. But I think those are like 3 simple drills that you can do, because the most important thing, and that ties into like the mechanical thing of what I sometimes see with guys, is they don't know how to load their back hip. So if you can kind of have 3 like drills that you can do consistently when you're starting off your catch play, that you can resort to every day, no matter the time constraint, I think that's important.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's where, hopefully, if coaches end up hearing this, that they understand that, especially with their pitchers, that they need to give them proper time.
Yeah.
Things are a little bit different nowadays in terms of what the research shows, and how much they need to throw, what types of throws they need to make, and just giving them the ability to go through that and go through their progressions, because ultimately in the long run they're going to stay hopefully healthier and perform better. So it's in the coach's best interest to kind of let the pitchers do their own thing.
Yeah. And that's those are just 3 basic drills, but for every guy it's different. I think every guy has, in our case, what we do at the facility is every guy has his unique plyo care routine based on the movement inefficiencies that we see when they first come in, and based on my assessment in terms of throwing mechanics, I guess you can say, and then Matt's assessment when it comes to assessing their body and their potential movement capacity and movement inefficiencies. Um, we start to kind of attack what they need specifically. So that's those 3 drills that I suggest are at a very granular level of what you can be doing. But as coaches, especially from what I see in high school and younger, is you need to be giving your pitchers adequate time to throw. Because at the end of the day, they'll be the first ones to complain when their pitchers aren't performing on the mound. So you can't have both sides of the coin if you're not promoting them actually throwing. Um, so I think having a structured program for your pitchers from a day-to-day basis to say, okay, this is what you're doing on Monday, this is what your plan is on Tuesday, so on and so forth. Especially at these levels where you're with guys 6 days a week per se, it's important to structure out what they need to do and give them the time to do so, because it goes a long way in player to coach relationships, and it goes a long way in the success you get out of your guys when you want them to step foot on the rubber and compete for you.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about long toss,
Yep.
because I know that you're a big proponent of it, and I know that that's something that you preach with the guys. Could you speak on long toss and how that works for you?
Yeah. So we usually like to break our days off into, I like to have guys on a 4 to 5 day throwing routine if possible, depending on their schedules. Um, but usually once we build up, and I mean, if we're looking in terms of the off season, I usually like to have a 3 to 4 week build up process until we start reaching our max long toss. And at this point, looking at the time period we're in now, everyone should be built up. Everyone should have been ready for the season. Um, so my approach on long toss is, I think long toss is the easiest way to work on what you need to work on yourself without anyone around. I think it's a good opportunity to take everything that, we talk about, and um, if you're talking about other stuff with another pitching coach, it's an opportunity to kind of have your own time to self-reflect and evaluate what you're doing, and it promotes athleticism. I think that's one of the best things about it is we get caught up in the pitching world on teaching pitching mechanics, um, and I honestly think we get away from teaching athletic movements. And I think long toss is a great way to teach athleticism, because at the end of the day, like, every movement a pitcher performs on the mound needs to be done with athleticism, or else you can't execute on it efficiently. And I think long toss is first and foremost a great way to build arm speed, not arm strength, arm speed. Um, and it also allows for guys to learn about themselves. And it gets them on a structured routine, because you go, okay, like, say Monday's my heavy day, I'm going to long toss 300 feet, and it's visual. You can see if you throw the ball 300 feet or not. Um, so it gives you immediate feedback. It tells you what you kind of need to work on. Um, and it gives you an opportunity to, like I said, learn more about yourself, and develop good habits.
Yep. All very good advice, and hopefully um, everyone is at least able to throw a little bit,
Yeah.
or within walking distance to a field, or driving distance with a parent or something, to go find the closest open. Um, don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you
but
don't mind me jumping in on one more thing with long
go for it.
toss too. Um, this is something that I know we talk about. We're stuck. I mean, especially being in New England, we're stuck inside all winter. And long toss, I want to make clear, long toss is not something that you need a partner for, or you need to be outside for. Um, so if you're bound to a cage or whatever the situation is in the winter, um, you can simulate distance by throwing into a net, because it all boils down to feel. Just like anything, it's all feel based. Um, so it's being able to channel that feel and understand, okay, what is it like to throw a ball 300 feet, and simulate that into a net. So it's an accountability thing, I think, as well too, especially in our case being here in the Northeast, that you need to be able to channel that feel, and hold yourself accountable for that day. So if your day in the winter is supposed to be a max intent long toss day, you shouldn't throw for 5 minutes and then call it a day. Um, so I think that I kind of wanted to get that out there too, that that's something that you can do, whether it's 75 degrees and sunny and you have access to a football field or baseball field, or if it's 20 degrees and there's snow on the ground and the only place you can go is to an indoor cage.
Sure. So pretty much get up. There's no excuses. Do your
Yeah.
long toss.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
So we did kind of skip over it, but I do want to go back into it. What is something that you've noticed more as from a mechanic standpoint? Because I know, let's get it out of the way about pitching mechanics in general, that there's a lot going on. But
Yeah.
is there any way you can simplify it and just say, what is something that you've really picked up on, or even an old school, or an older cue that you might hear all the time? If you want to go in that direction, and just say how you look at things from that angle now, being on the coaching side.
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed is pitching mechanics in the past has been kind of like everyone gets thrown in the same basket, and everyone uses the same type of coaching cues to, like, to what they think is going to fix the problem, I guess you can say. Um, but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot more that goes into it than just saying, "Hey, throw strikes," or "Hey, get out in front." Um,
Use your legs.
Yeah, use your legs. That's another one. Or what did they say? Like, you want to be able to put a pizza box on your back when you finish. Like, there's a lot of things that I've heard growing up, that it's very, you throw everyone in the same bucket, in terms of these are the cues that are going to work for them. Um, but I don't think that's really the approach um, that you need to take if you're going to develop high level successful pitchers that are going to be able to go out and compete and also stay healthy. And I think that's the most important thing, is health. When we're looking at evaluating mechanics, and when Matt and I tell guys, we think you need to do this, it's not because we want you to be upset and say, oh, I have all these mechanical flaws. Um, Matt and John don't like how I throw, whatever. Um, at the end of the day, our job is to evaluate how is this going to play out long term, and you're going to be able to stay healthy. Um, so I think when looking back to coaches and you're throwing everyone in the same bucket, you're doing guys a disservice because you're maybe telling them to do something that they can't physically do, and down the road it could end up impacting them. Um, so I think it's important to take kind of a 10,000 feet above view of your pitcher, um, and understand, okay, can they move this way? Or if you don't know the answer, refer them to someone that maybe can help. Because I think you also do them a mental disservice by giving them these cues, because now they're trying to perform something that they can't do, and any competitor is going to get frustrated, no matter what the cue is or what the advice is. If they can't do it, or they're not able to perform the way you want them to, they're going to end up mentally beating themselves up. um, so that's kind of my take on the whole old school coaching cue thing, because I think it does more harm than good most of the time.
Sure. And I think that it all comes back. There is some importance to observing and interpreting what successful players and coaches have said in the past, and that goes back to the field discussion, where
Yeah.
when they were playing, or when they were coaching and pitching and stuff like that, these are certain things that they these are things that I had a bargain from one
Uh-oh.
of my daughters.
That's tentacles.
Oh,
No, I made
in
my
the,
own
in the freezer.
No, I don't know what that is. Come.
Um, so just using that feel versus real debate, and saying, Lila, in the feel versus real debate, that you need to be able to still listen and listen to their experiences and what they were feeling when they threw. And a pitching coach might tell you that you need to use your legs. We might be teaching it now using certain drills to
Yeah.
say, well, this is how we get into the back hip and use the glute versus the quad. But back when they played, that's what they felt, right? That
Yeah.
they used their legs more.
Yeah.
So speak on that, John. What are some of the drills that you started to incorporate this year when it came to using your legs?
Well, I think it was something that we like. The way I look at it is, if you're going to ingrain a new pattern, it's going to come over time. So something that you and I talked about, and that I really wanted to implement this year, and I think we did a good job of it, was implementing constraint-based drills. So you hear a lot in the baseball world talking about constraint-based training. And some of the things that we did was we got creative with different exercises for different guys, in terms of what they did before their catch play. So one of the things that we implemented was, in terms of like helping guys feel loading into their back hip, was kind of using a box as almost a guide to understand what it feels like to properly achieve hip flexion, which is in sitting back into your glute. Because that's the most common, I guess you could say, mechanical flaw that we do see, is guys come in with the misunderstanding of what it means to load into your back hip, or no understanding at all, I guess you could say. So we get creative in that sense in implementing certain plyo care drills too. Like I said, most of our plyo care drills are similar to what I kind of mentioned in those 3 simple catch play drills that you can do, while also kind of doing a lot more. And another thing that I think I found really successful this offseason was medicine ball stuff, because I think that's a really simple way to promote the proper feel that we want, um, while not throwing the baseball. Because I think we're looking at, there's a lot of things that go into it, and looking at workload management and training economy, and understanding like what guys can handle for a day's worth of training, or what's in their program. So on like the lighter days of throwing, and especially early on in kind of their on-ramping phase, we spent a lot of time with medicine ball work, and doing different med ball shot puts, while still replicating how we want them to move when they're in a pitching environment, or they're asked to throw the baseball. So that's something that I think we found a lot of success with, and I think we saw patterns translate a lot quicker, because we could implement a med ball routine pretty much every day.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that became programmed into each each player's workouts and things like that. And I know that one of the misconceptions that we hear a lot from kids when we do start to talk to them about their lower half is they think that they need to push off the mound,
Yeah.
right? Where I'll let you dive in a second, but that's not necessarily what we want guys to do. It's a little bit of a misconception in terms of pushing off the mound and in terms of direction of where that force is going.
Yeah, so I think you hear a lot, and this gets back to the old school cues, is like you got to get down the mound, like, oh, your stride's too short. Well, the first thing that happens when we look at like movements is we need to be able to we want to use our big muscles to our advantage. And the big thing with pitching mechanics, I guess you can say, the first thing we want to do is be able to put force into the ground. Um, we don't want to put force. We don't want to put force moving away from the rubber. We want to start by putting force down, like we want to push the ground away from us, and then be able to ride our back hip down the slope of the mound. So yes, we want to get down the mound in a sense, but we want to get down the mound after we've already loaded into our back hip. So the load phase, I guess you can say, it's a dynamic movement in a sense, like it's continuously happening. But it's that first initial movement where we can I like to refer to it as like a deadlift almost, like if we're getting into almost a deadlift type position. I guess that's kind of the easiest way to put it. But we want to be able to put as much force into the ground as possible and be able to continually hold that force until we get into front foot strike, I guess you can say, without diving into too much detail. I don't want to overwhelm people with anatomy and stuff, but I think that's the simplest way to put it is you hear a lot saying push off the rubber. Well, we don't want to push off the rubber. We want to put force into the ground, be able to ride out our back hip. And then that's going to put us in a pretty successful position to maximize what we can out of our glutes, which is arguably one of the most important muscles that we need to use in terms of being a successful thrower of a baseball, I guess you can say.
Right. And having guys tend to think that they need to push off is one of the last things that comes off the ground when you push off something is your toes, your big toe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So speak to that a little bit and how that can end up causing problems.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'll commonly see is, like you said, guys will they'll end up pushing off their big toe, which ends up kind of throwing their sequence out of whack in terms of what happens later in the delivery. So what we'll see with guys is their pelvis rotates too early, and then their trunk ends up rotating with their pelvis. So usually when we see those guys come in and they lack a good load into their back hip, we'll usually see stride direction get thrown off. So we'll see guys putting a lot of force into the ground with their big toe, which you'll see their knee dive out over their toes. And their delivery kind of ends up very quad, knee and shin dominant. That's kind of those three pieces that I like to use with people when I do see that. And then you'll see those guys end up like they'll compensate elsewhere, and their trunk won't be able to load and unload efficiently. We'll see a lot of arm side high misses, or we'll see them accidentally cut balls or yank balls glove side, I should say. So usually the results speak to themselves when you go back and look to the video. And if you evaluate a guy over a course of a 15 to 20 pitch bullpen, chances are he's going to show you like what he usually does when he's missing in a game. When you go back and look at video, you can usually see that. So that's usually the most common thing we'll see is guys will tend to want to jump off the rubber and push into what we call early hip extension, where their pelvis kind of unloads too fast and they're kind of out of sequence in terms of what eventually happens further up in the delivery, and their trunk can't set up on time. And like I said, we usually see those arm side high misses or glove side down misses, which that's not fixed by the simple, get out in front release point or fix your stride length. So there's a lot more that goes into it in terms of when we're kind of addressing movement quality and how that kind of needs to be changed in order to correct those visual misses that we see.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into something that you and I have talked a lot about, and I use the expression chasing ghosts.
Yeah.
Where you look and this goes back to everybody has an iPhone now. So people pull up video immediately and they start saying, okay, I see X, Y, and Z wrong with this delivery, but they completely forget about what happens at A, B, and C.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, I think understanding that, I look at the delivery as building a house. If you don't have a good foundation, chances are you're not going to be able to build a successful house that's going to have a stable base. And more times than not, if you don't have a good foundation, the house is going to even fall down. So that goes back to the health thing that we're talking about. So I think it's important to understand that we don't want to chase something that we maybe see like happening further on in the delivery without addressing what could be causing that to happen. So I think in terms of my evaluation, I like to have a mental checklist of, okay, let's start from the load into the back hip. Are they doing that successfully? And then we work our way up into addressing other things, because we want to take a very, I guess you can call it, holistic approach to developing pitchers. And it doesn't just start by saying that's the one thing. There's usually multiple things that kind of end up happening, that are causing different issues. But I think it's important to start from the ground up, and chase the root cause of the problem instead of chasing something that's the easiest to see. So I think diving into actually what's going on is important, because you'll find kind of what the actual issue is.
I'm smiling because I just got somebody just asked a question. So I don't know if you want to answer that one now.
It's up to you if you had anything else you wanted to talk about.
Well, I just think to kind of summarize what you just said, that's something that coaches and even dads could look at a younger age, right? That's one very specific thing that can clean up a lot of issues is looking at that back foot. What does it do when somebody goes into their pitching motion?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something that if I were speaking to a group of parents or little league coaches or high school coaches, whatever it may be, is there's so many resources out there that are free, that, like I said, Driveline like has so many free articles and resources that you could immerse yourself in for hours. Um, so I think it's a cop out approach to use those old school cues to say, hey, like, get out in front, or hey, your stride is too short, like lengthen your stride. Like, I think those are cop out ways and cop out answers, because with the amount of information there is out there, you can very simply go on Driveline and read articles about how to load into your back hip, or how to coach arm action, or what to look for. So I think it's simple as like you said, using an iPhone camera and setting up a tripod and, recording a bullpen session. And there's easy ways to make adjustments, and to be able to help guys make adjustments.
Yeah, well, they could come see you, John, right?
Yeah, they could do that too. They could do that too.
I also, before we get to the question and answer, I do have somebody who sent me some questions. So I was wondering if you could answer those for me, all right?
Sure.
Top 3 starting pitchers of all time.
That's a tough one. Nolan Ryan, is definitely up there. You got to go with Cy Young because the award's named after him. So you have to say, arguably, he has to be on the list. I would say we witnessed one of the greatest pitchers of all time in Clayton Kershaw. I would say he arguably will go down as one of the greatest pitchers of all time. There's a lot of other ones out there, but my baseball references page isn't in front of me, so I can't really.
That's all right. I'm just asking the questions as they come in. The next one is top 3 relievers of all time.
Mariano Rivera, obviously, I would say is number 1. There's a lot of good ones. Goose Gossage is one of my favorites to watch, just because I think he was so far ahead of his time in terms of velocity, and just the intent he threw with. I would say that's more on my list of like old school guys I like to watch. And then, gosh, I don't know what my third one would be. I got nothing on that.
That's all right. MJ or LeBron?
I don't know. I'm not going to dive into that topic. Um, I would say I would say
You
you have to
can't
go
go
with
wrong.
MJ.
I mean, they're doing
Yeah,
the
yeah. No,
special.
I would say MJ just because you know you look at guys who played like before I was watching basketball, and he just kind of has that legendary. It's Michael Jordan, it's got that legendary name to him, and he had a legendary career. So LeBron's still playing, so I don't know. I can't go with LeBron just yet. His playing career is still going on. So
Good answer. And the last question from from this same person was they wanted to know how um, you make your famous bread and cheese sandwich.
oh God, that's a secret that won't get let out. So and I know who's asking these questions too. So um, yeah, that's a secret that won't get let out. So
Well, Nick, and all kidding aside, this is why I tied this in. Nick wanted to come on, but for some reason the Zoom app wasn't um, loading for him. But can you speak about the experience of working with someone that's pitching professional baseball and how that went this offseason?
yeah, so I think it was something that was pretty cool and something that, I obviously, didn't expect getting into. I mean, this being my first year of coaching, it was something that, even just having clients to work with in general wasn't anything I was like, I didn't expect the kind of off season that I had. Um, but in terms of having the opportunity to work with Nick, it was definitely an awesome experience because you're working with someone who's at the highest level and has done things at the highest level for a long time. Um, so to be able to kind of understand, I think the coolest thing is his ability to understand his body, and be able to communicate the things he's feeling, based on what him and I would be talking about, is what was so cool because we could make changes in a matter of a few days or a matter of a week. Um, and I think, you learn a lot about what the capability is of someone, if they really commit to what they want to do. And I think that was one of the things that I learned is like you look at someone like Nick who maybe who did have it figured out, I guess you could say, in the realm of what he was doing. I mean, throwing 100 miles an hour, and to come in and be open to the stuff that we talked to him about, and making those changes to how he moved and some things that we thought maybe were causing issues along the way for him. And for him to be able to commit to it every day, and the results we were able to see, I think that was the most awesome thing about it. And to be able to do it as in my first few months of coaching, um, kind of made it even better because it was a learning experience. I learned a lot, and it challenged me because it wasn't like I see this guy once a week or something like that, or he's got other things going on. Like that's his life, that's his job, and he's going to be committed to doing it. So it's my job as the coach to provide him with the best information possible so he can yield the best results, for him, that's going to allow him to be healthy and then go to spring training and be able to be even better, um, than where he was.
Right. And one of the biggest keys in that whole thing that you just said was his accountability, right? His accountability to the details of how he went about um, his workouts and his throwing and everything was he was striving to be somewhat perfect on everything that he did. It wasn't just, okay, I'm going to do my J bands and now I'm gonna like kind of half-ass them and then I'm done and skip over stuff. It was like
Mhm.
the very it was very very regimented, and you picked up on that with his throwing, and he wanted to know right away what's going on, why am I doing this, what's causing this to happen. So that is a great learning experience to see how that all ties together at that level.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and that's something that I'm starting to try and instill, and something we tried to instill this whole off season too in our younger guys is. I remember one night that Nick was throwing, I texted pretty much all the high school guys and had them come and watch. And then each time that I work with them after that, I asked them what was one thing that you learned. Um, and the biggest thing that the most common answer was attention to the detail. And like you said, understanding that, you know, even a bullpen session is a process. that each pitch is a process. And I think that was the biggest thing, was just, everything mattered. And I think having that experience in, like I said, just my few months of coaching made me really realize, if I'm gonna get the best results out of the younger guys, they need to understand how important everything they do is. Because I think that's just something that gets lost. And like getting back to all the stuff we talked about, them only having 10 minutes to play catch at a high school practice, or younger guys, same thing. You got middle school kids playing AAU baseball and they have, same thing, 5 minutes to warm up. Um, so I think it helps me, and it helps us to really kind of instill that accountability to say, this is what someone is doing at the highest level. And even the other guys that come in, like Mason and CJ, same thing. Like, we can turn to them and use them as examples, and positive examples, because I think and I've seen it in just the text I've been getting from guys over these past few weeks, is guys are really stepping up, and doing really good things, even when, there's no baseball right now. And I think you may not see it right away, but I think it wears off on guys in a positive way over time, in terms of their kind of newfound approach to their baseball career. Because at the end of the day, you only have one baseball career. And right now it's kind of gotten taken away from everyone. So, yeah, I'd say those are probably the biggest things that I learned, as a coach, that I could translate to pretty much everyone.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So this is definitely an opportunity for all of you to put John on the spot and ask him a question. If there's anything you want to pick his brain. I mean, most of you have access to him anyway, but I know that there have been people even online that have reached out to us, and then I've handed them off to John about pitching and throwing. And where did that guy send us videos from? What was that?
Well, what was it? Where was it Aruba? No, it wasn't Aruba. The Netherlands. The Netherlands.
Yeah, Netherlands. Yep.
Yeah.
So John's an open book. He'll definitely get back to you if you have any. If you don't want to ask now, don't hesitate to ask him. There's no stupid questions when it comes to baseball. What was your favorite pitch to throw in high school?
A strike. No.
You would say that.
No, that is the most important pitch to throw, though, is a strike. But
what type of pitch? What type of pitch?
Probably my slider. That's something I've always been a guy that never threw hard, so I would always pitch backwards. And I'd use my plus pitches, I guess you could say, to my advantage. So I'd say my slider was probably my favorite pitch to throw in high school, and even until recently, it was one of my better pitches, and I would tend to play my fastball off my slider instead of vice versa.
Sure. What would, just so some of these guys know what you were able to do, what did you get up to for your pull downs?
I think it was 88 with the baseball. I don't know if that was in high school or freshman year of college. Yeah, I don't remember, but I know my highest was 88.
Yeah, so you pulled down 88. How much did you deadlift?
I think 425.
So for all those guys who John has you beat with his pull downs and his deadlift, you better get on it, because I'm sure he'll be happy when every single one of you ends up passing those numbers.
Definitely.
What is the most important thing to do when recovering from an injury?
I would say the most important, if we're gonna look at throwing, it's having a plan. And if you don't, most guys that get hurt, they rely on a doctor or something, but rely on baseball people who I would say the stuff that me and Matt are doing in terms of injury recovery is really important, because Matt can assess other limitations and him and I can talk in terms of a throwing program. But it's having a plan. I would say that's the biggest thing, is having a plan, understanding that, you see a lot of guys that want to get back quick, especially at the high school level. But it's understanding that's a process. And if you're going to maintain long-term health and success, that understanding to have like that you need to have a plan. So and reaching out to the resources that can help you. So I would say those are the two most important things.
Sure. And we're here if you have any specific questions, any sort of throwing related questions for return to throwing or anything like that, then don't hesitate to reach out. John, we've had multiple requests for you to shave.
Yeah,
That's not the first time.
the quarantine beard, it's getting to me.
I think the beard should go and just leave the mustache.
Yeah, that'll have to go at some point. Once we get back into the facility, maybe I'll have a new look and the beard will be gone.
All right. Any other questions, guys? There's also a question here as to how come that there's a velocity vortex in Western Cranston.
It boils down to just don't throw slow, CJ. That's what we'll just have to say. Don't throw slow. But no, I think we found that there's maybe a velocity vortex at Hops too in the pitching tunnel, because we get a lot of complaints where guys think they're throwing harder, and I'm like, listen, the radar gun doesn't lie. Like it gives you the answer right here. So I mean, if you want to question the machine, then go ahead. But this is what it's telling me.
All right. I don't see any other.
We have a couple more.
I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank John for coming on and flipping roles a little bit and him being the guest, because I think he has a lot of good information to share for the Rhode Island baseball community and even areas around further outside of Rhode Island. I think that he's a guy who's going to be around for a while. So tomorrow night, we're actually going to have some softball college recruiting panel on, because and we're hoping to get something to go for baseball too from a college recruiting standpoint, because the rules are a little bit different. But that's what's on deck for tomorrow night. And then Wednesday, I'm going to be on with Elise, she and I run the Hops hitting account. So you got some college softball recruiting and then some hitting stuff coming up, and just keep an eye out for some of the other Zoom meetings. All right.
Yeah.
Sean.
I appreciate you having me on and flipping roles tonight. So good stuff.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.